Hello everyone, my name is Claudius Kazan. In this video, we continue harmonic analysis on the chorale arrangement by Johann Michael Nicolai, a very early Baroque composer. And we're going to do line 3 and 4 this time. We continue so we can finish what we started in the last video. I will also perform for you the number 46 from the Solfeges and number 43 from Robert Starr's Rhythmic Training Book exercise. So I'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's take a look at line 3 and 4, the last two lines of this chorale that we started in the previous video. And let's see if we find anything new in these two lines so we can finish the harmonic analysis on this chorale arrangement by Johann Michael Nicolai. Now, the chorale was not written by Johann Michael. It was written by a, maybe his grandfather or somebody a little earlier than that, another Nicolai in the family. But Johann Michael arranged it in his own way. And a lot of Baroque composers were taking earlier hymns written by very early Baroque or even Renaissance composers and arranging them according to the new sonorities and the new chords they were trying to play with in those times. Okay, let's look at the line 3 first. And you can see in here that the chorale is written in C major, very easy. If you see any accidentals, that means that chord does not belong to C major, okay? And we have to find out how it's related then with C major. But in this particular line number 3, I'm looking at it, I don't see any accidentals. That means that all these chords actually belong to C major. So let's quickly go through them. First chord. Okay, notes are G, B, D. You can see this in the upper left corner. That's where I arrange all these triads in root position. And if you don't have them, if you have to sit in an exam or something and do harmonic analysis, make sure you have a piece of paper or music paper next to you where you're going to sketch all these chords in root position. It's very important to do this because this gives you the Roman numeral that you'll have to put underneath. Okay, so GBD is the triad built on the 5th degree of C major, C, D, E, F, G, right? GBD, major triad, and that gives us Roman numeral 5. That's the dominant chord. Okay, so 5, but the chord here is not in root position. G is not in the bass. B is in the bass, which is the 3rd of the chord. Okay, therefore, we also have to put in Arabic numeral 6. And you can go back to my prior videos where I talk about triad inversions, okay? And you'll see why when we're dealing with a triad in first inversion, we give it Arabic numeral 6. So this is a 5-6 in short. 5 Roman numeral, meaning the dominant in first inversion. All right, second chord. Second chord is the chord of the 4, F, A, C. If you arrange those notes in thirds, you get F, A, C. Okay, but F again is not in the bass. A is in the bass. A is the 3rd of the chord. Therefore, Arabic numeral 6, just like the previous chord. Okay, now if you look carefully in the bass, we have a note that moves up. I challenge you to put these notes in thirds at that particular moment on the 4th beat. B, A, C, F. That really does not sound like a Baroque period chord. That sounds like a more modern chord. Therefore, that B does not belong to that chord. Okay? And we have to label it as a non-chord tone. Okay? The way it behaves, it's approached and left by step in the same direction. That means it's a passing tone. And I label it with that circle with the arrow through it, okay, meaning a passing tone. You could also draw a line and say passing tone if you want, but there are some symbols that have been developed by composers and analysts through the years, and they came up with this one with a circle with the arrow through, meaning that it's a passing tone, approach left by step in the same direction, okay? And that ties really nicely the A, okay, which is a chord tone in the previous chord, to the C in the next measure, where you find that C as a chord tone again, okay? So we have a passing tone at that particular point. And it's also on the bass. It's nice to have these passing tones in the bass sometimes. The bass usually jumps around to give you the basis of these chords and so on. And they're a melodic line, and it's not always very smooth. That's why sometimes it's good to put some of these passing tones in the bass too, to smooth out a little bit this jagged line that the bass has to go through usually. All right, let's go on to the next measure. The next measure is the chord of 1. C, E, G are the notes, very easy, and it's also in root position, nothing to worry about there. Next chord is the chord of the 5 again, G, B, D, and it is in root position, but in the last quarter note of that measure, you also see the F being introduced in the tenor. Now, you can try to put these in thirds. G, F, B, D. Oh, that's a dominant 7th chord. All right, and because it's also based on G, which is 5, in C major, that's a 5/7 at that particular point. Okay, so the composer starts with a triad and then introduces the F, which becomes a 5/7 at that point. And it's in root position. Very good. Next chord is the chord of the 6 in the 3rd measure. A, C, E are the notes. Okay, it's a minor triad, therefore the lowercase Roman numeral 6 in there. We're going to come back and analyze the cadences in a moment once we are done doing harmonic analysis on this line. So next chord is the chord of the 5 again, very similar to the one just before the chord of the 6, okay? The tenor does exactly the same thing, moves down through the 7th to the E, okay, which is a chord tone in the next chord, okay? And I analyze it exactly the same way. It's a 5 with a 7 being brought in. All right, 4th measure. Again, C, E, G are the notes, chord of the 1. We don't have to spend any time there. And the next one is the chord of the 2, okay? Minor chord, D, F, A are the notes, okay? And you can see in the alto, alto is moving now through a non-chord tone. But you can argue in here that actual B could be part of the chord. D, F, okay? And then you have the B and then an F. Can you put these in thirds? Yes, you can. B, D, F would be your chord. And actually, in this particular slide here, I put in parentheses the chord of the 7. Yeah, you can label as a passing tone. That's perfectly fine. But if you were to be technically correct, that chord at that moment on the 4th beat of that measure, it's also the chord of the 7 in first inversion, because B is not in the bass, the D is in the bass. Therefore, this is a diminished triad built on the B, okay? Now, you could argue because it's so transient, it's so quick in there, do you really hear it as a 7th chord in there? The chord built on the 7th degree? Probably not, but here it is. This is the technical and technically correct version of the analysis for that particular beat of that measure. All right. So remember, all these voices sustain. Okay. This particular chord starts on the 3rd beat and sustains through the 4th beat. Okay. And that's where on the 4th beat the alto moves through the B. Okay. You can stop the video and analyze this. So I analyze this in 2 ways. You know, the technically correct one, which is this one with the 7, chord of the 7 built on the 7th degree as a diminished triad in first inversion, or the passing tone version as well. If I were to do this in an exam, I would probably let them know that I know both versions. Somehow you can, work both versions in. That way your teachers can actually see that you are thinking properly in here. But if you miss one of them, you should still get the credit because both versions are correct. All right, let's move on. Next measure, chord of the 1 again, but it's in first inversion. E is in the bass, not C. Okay, next chord is also chord of the 5 in root position, and finally you get the next cadence, chord of the 1 as well. Next chord there, it's the chord of the 5, right? G, B, D in first inversion, therefore the 6 Arabic numeral. Again, chord of the 1, and then we move through the chord of the 4, okay, in first inversion, FAC, but A's in the bass. You can see it here. Then chord of the 5, 6, 5. Now, why did I put 5, 6, 5? Whenever you see a 6, 5, that means we're dealing with a 7th chord, okay? And 6, 5 is the 7th chord in first inversion. Okay, the notes here are G, B, D, F in root position. But what we have here, we have B in the bass, and then D and F. Remember, the F sustains from the soprano. Soprano has a whole note in there, and that F is to be sustained through the entire measure. That's where I'm getting the F from. So the notes here from the bottom up are B, G, D, F. And you have to analyze that at that point, which gives us a 5, 6, 5. Okay, 5, meaning that it's built on the 5th degree. It's a 7th chord in first inversion. Okay, and the last measure here gives us the chord of the 1, C, E, G, and sustains, basically that harmony sustains through the entire measure. There's just some exchange of notes. Okay, the bass moves up an octave, and there's some switching going on in the soprano and the alto, but the harmony itself is exactly the same. Good. Let's go back now and do some analysis on the cadences. First cadence, whenever you see a fermata, that's where we label cadences, and we always have to look at the prior chord and the chord where the fermata is. This combination of the two will give us the kind of a cadence we are dealing with. Now, you see in here that we're moving from the chord of the 5 to the chord of the 6. We haven't seen this before, but this is called a deceptive cadence. Now, let me tell you why it's called deceptive. Because whenever you have a 7th chord, a 5, for example, moving to a 1, for example, you have this chord going to 1. This is what you expect. All right? So you would expect a chord like this to automatically resolve here. But in a deceptive cadence, we have this chord going here. Okay? So that's not quite accepted, not quite expected. That's why we call it a deceptive resolution. So remember, anything going from 5 to 6 is called a deceptive cadence. All right, let's move on to the next cadence. Cadence of 5 to a 1. We already know this very well. This is called an authentic cadence. And we also look to make sure that both chords are in root position, and in the resolving chord, if we have the root in the bass and the soprano, we call this arrangement here as a perfect authentic. And then we have to look at the key. Where does this work in? This one works in C major, so it's a PA in 1, perfect authentic cadence in the key of C, or 1. And finally, the last cadence on this line, we have a 5, 6, 5 going to a 1. Doesn't matter that it's a 7th chord. A 5 to a 1 is called an authentic cadence. And but in the chord of the 5, this is not in root position. This is a first inversion, that 6, 5 we talked about. All right, so that immediately tells us it's not a perfect authentic anymore. It's an imperfect authentic. Okay, and also you look at the 1 chord and you see that the root, it's only in the bass. Okay, the soprano has the 3rd, that E. Okay, so it's imperfect on 2 counts already, not just 1. Okay, so definitely an imperfect authentic in the key of 1, or C major. Excellent. let's look at the last line, finally, line number 4. And I can see some accidentals in here, so let's quickly see what's going on. First chord there, it's the chord of the 6 again. A, C, E are the notes. Okay, so that's a minor triad in root position, right? Therefore, just Roman numeral 6, lowercase. And in the second chord, we have a G sharp in the bass. Let's look at these notes again. G sharp, D, E, B. Can we put these in thirds? Yes, we can. E, G sharp, B, D would be our chord, and that's the chord of the 5. It's a dominant 7th chord, but not in the original key, and not in C major. If this is a 5 of some sort, what key does it function in? So we have to go down a fifth. A major. What's A major in the key of C? A is the 6th scale degree. That's why I label this as a 5-6-5. 6-5 because that 7th chord is not in root position. E is not on the bass. G sharp is in the bass. So 5-6-5 of what? Of the 6th. Okay? So you have to go down a fifth from there. So this is your chord in root position. Okay? Well, it would be an A minor, not A major, like the... And that functions as a 6 in the original key of C. All right, every time you see an accidental and so, take that chord, arrange it in thirds, and see what it functions like. This one functions as a dominant 7th chord. E, G sharp, B, D is a dominant 7th chord. And if it is a dominant 7th chord, what is it the dominant of? The dominant, it's always on the 5th degree, so go down a perfect 5th. Okay, and you'll find out that it functions in some kind of A. Now, if you want to relate A to C, it would be A minor, the relative minor of C major, right? Not A major. A major is a more distant key, but A minor is the relative minor of C major. So that's why that 5, that dominant, functions in A minor, and A minor is the 6th in the key of C. That's why 5-6-5 of 6, that slash notation. Okay, and sure enough, look at the next chord, and you will see that he actually takes that chord to A minor. Okay, A, C, E. Okay, very predictable, very nicely done. Very good, let's go on. Does he stay in A minor? Not really. He only borrowed one chord from A minor, resolved it to an A minor chord, but then he goes right back in the chord of 1. Okay? That chord of the 1, it's actually in first inversion. I didn't put the 6 in there, but we'll correct it. Make sure that 1, it's a 1-6, not just a 1. Next chord is the chord of the 2. D, F, A, C are the notes. Okay? But F is in the bass. That makes it a 2-6-5. 7th chord in first inversion is a 6-5. Okay? Next chord is obviously the chord of the 5, and this time we do the same thing, but this time in the alto, that going through the 7 of the chord on the way back to the chord of the 1. That's why I labeled this a 5, and then later on becoming a 5-7. Okay? And finally, this cadence takes everything to the home base here in C major. Okay, and the harmony for the entire measure again is C, just some exchange of notes, but the entire measure is 1. Okay, next chord is the chord of the 4. F, A, C are the notes, but F is not in the bass, A is in the bass, therefore the 4-6. Okay, next chord, the chord of the 1, but in first inversion since E is in the bass. I'm moving a little quickly through this because this is really not that interesting. F, A, C in the next chord, that's the chord of the 4 major. And finally, we come to something more interesting. C sharp, A, E. Let's put these in thirds. A, C sharp, E, right? A, C sharp, E would be a chord. But C sharp is borrowed again from another key. Okay? where does he take it next? Let's move quickly to the next one. He takes it to the D chord. So A, C sharp, E will move to D, F, A. Could this be the 5 of something? Yes, it could. So A, C sharp, E, go down a 5th. So this chord is the 5 of this chord, which is the 2. Okay? So, and here we have the 5 of 2. Okay? Because that's where he takes the chord. Now, it's not a 5-7 like it was in this is just the triad. It's not a 7th chord, but it doesn't matter. It's still the relationship. It's 5 of 2 moving to 2. Okay? Because that C sharp does not belong into C major. It belongs to D minor. Okay? Which is the chord of in the next chord. D minor is this. Or C sharp is the leading tone in that key. That's where we borrow the C sharp and this particular chord. Okay? Very good. Now, whenever you see accidentals that don't belong to that particular chorale, in that key, you always have to analyze and see where does he take the chord next. Okay? And that's how you make your decision based on looking at that chord itself and where he takes the note. And you can see that in the next measure, he takes it to the chord of the 2. Yes, he gives you a 7th chord at that point, but nevertheless, it's the chord of the 2. The notes are D, F, A, C. Subdominant function, okay? It's a subdominant function, meaning that it could move to the dominant on the way back to the 1, okay? So instead of the F, okay, we have this one, okay? A lot of notes in common. The only note that's not in common between the chord of the 2 and the 4 is that D is in the bass. Okay, F, A, C is still there. That's the chord of the 4. D, F, A, C is the chord of the 2. Okay, that's why the subdominant function there. And finally, we have the chord of the 5. It's expected after the chord of the 2. Okay, and then finally to C major afterwards. Very good. Let's look at the cadences in here really quickly. Okay, first cadence, when we come from the 5-6-5 of 6 going to 6. Now, you're going to say, oh, that's my deceptive cadence. No, it's not. Very careful in here. We're not coming from a 5 to a 6 for it to be a deceptive cadence. Okay? That would be very clear. We're coming from a 5 of something to a 1 of something. Okay? So this is a 5 to a 1 relationship. It's the 5 of the 6 moving to the 6 of the 1 of the 6, which is, or just the 6, which means that we have an authentic cadence in here. Very careful when we do this, okay? This is not a deceptive cadence just because it moves to the chord of the 6, but where are you coming from? Are you coming from the chord of the 5 for it to be a deceptive cadence, or are you coming from another chord that spells a 5-1 relationship of some sort, okay? So this is an authentic cadence. So we look at the inversions here. Yeah, one of them is an inversion, so it can be a perfect authentic, okay? Automatically, it's an imperfect authentic. And you can see then in the chord of the 6 there, or the 1 of the 6, okay, the soprano has a note other than the root. So it's imperfect on 2 counts already. Very good. Please stop the video at this point. I want to make sure that you understand why this is not a deceptive cadence just because it stops on the chord of the 6. Okay? It's where you're coming from that's really important too. Okay? Not only where you got, but also where you're coming from. Okay, great. Next cadence. Next cadence comes from 5 to 1, so this is an authentic cadence again. And it's perfect because both chords are in root position, and in the last chord, the root is present in both the bass and the soprano. And the root here obviously is C because we are in C major. And finally, the last cadence, same thing, both chords in root position, 5 to 1, authentic, and we look at the root being present in both soprano and bass in the last chord, and that's true as well. So we have a PA in 1. PA, perfect, authentic, in the key of 1 or C major. All right, great. A lot of this was pretty boring, not much going on, but we hit on a couple of really important things in here. The first one was that deceptive cadence, which you learned about today, when we move from 5 to 6 and we stop on the 6th degree. Deceptively, instead of moving normally to the 1, we move to the 6. That's called a deceptive cadence. We also saw how in this last line here on the first cadence, we're moving from a 5 of something to that something. Okay, so we're borrowing that 5-1 relationship from another key. Okay, but it is a 5-1 relationship. In this case, was kind of funny because it borrows from the key of the 6 and it goes to the 6. Okay, the 5 of the 6 go into the 6. And you are tempted to immediately say, oh, this is my deceptive cadence again because I'm stopping on the 6th degree. You also have to look back and see where you're coming from. And here you're not coming from your own 5 to a 6, which would be normally a deceptive cadence. You're coming from a 5 of something to that something, which is a 5-1 relationship. Okay? And that immediately tells you, oh, this is an authentic cadence, just not in the original key of C. So we saw that this one's borrowed from the key of the 6, which is also the relative minor key of C major, which is A minor. Okay, so very careful in there. Stop the video if you think you need more help in that area. Let's see, anything else? Yeah, we have some 7th chords in here, like the 2-6-5, the 2-7. All right, you can see that you can have 7th chords in some of these other scale degrees, not just a 5. It's easy to put the dominant 7th chord in there and move it around because that's very obvious. But, you know, we have the 2-7 in here, the 2-6-5, okay? And that's also possible. And this is just Baroque music. You know, wait until you get to the classical and the Romantic period when, you know, the chords just explode with all kinds of other non-chord tones and all kinds of stuff, and more complex chords as well. Very good. This wraps up the harmonic analysis part of this. In my next video, I'm yet going to bring another chorale, not by Bach, but we're going to deal with some modulation this time. And we're going to talk about pivot chords and some other fun stuff and fun ways to modulate from one key to the other. In here, in these 2 chorales that we've done so far, we did not have any modulation. We didn't talk about modulation. All we did was we looked at how composers actually borrow chords from other keys. Okay? And we have to refer everything back to the original key. But next time we're going to take a look and to see what happens when we actually modulate. When we think about the new key and we do not relate anything back to the original key anymore, and what happens? What are the mechanisms that we can use to do this? And using pivot chords is one of the most used ways of modulating in the Baroque period and later periods as well. Very good. Let's take a look now at solfege number 46. Okay. So this is the second solfege in the pair of solfeges that you had to prepare for today. Okay. Starting next with my next solfege, I won't assign you 2 of them because they will become a little more complex. So you'll have only 1 solfege to prepare for each lesson from now on. Okay, this is solfege number 46. Let's quickly look at it. Okay, 2 flats in the key signature, 2 keys, 2 possible keys. One is B flat major, and the other one is G minor. Okay, a minor third apart. And I'm looking at this one. The beginning note is G, ending note is G. There's a lot of F sharps in there, which means that G minor might have a leading tone sign in there. So this is definitely G minor. I see the leading tone being employed there. I also see E natural this time, which is a 6th degree, which means that we have the melodic version of G minor being used in here as well. Okay, and a couple of other accidentals like A flat and so on, borrowed from other keys again. Okay, but since we're not doing harmonic analysis on this, we're just singing and making sure that we have the rhythm and the pitches together. That's good enough. All right, so let me go get my metronome. Metronome is on the phone. Okay, brought my metronome in here. I'm going to actually use a slower metronome this time. There's a lot of 16th notes in here, a lot of syncopations, chain of syncopations. I can see some really short rests, especially in the second line in there. Okay, so I don't want to go too fast. So instead of going 70, I might go, let's see, maybe 65. Okay, let's see how 65 sounds. Okay, let's make all these beats equal here. We don't need any accents on any other beats. Okay, good. Let's leave it at 65. Okay, it's a little slower than we normally do, but it will help me be a little more accurate. And same to you. Let's get the tonic chord here. G, Sol. Okay, so let's go. Sol, si, la, sol, fa, mi, fa, sol, si, sol, re. Fa, mi, re, sol, si, do, re, mi, fa, sol, si, do, re. Fa, si, do, re, mi, re, si, fa, sol, la, si, mi, re, do, re, si, fa. Sol, la, sol, la, si, do, mi, re, sol, fa, sol, mi, re, si, do, mi, re, si, do, la, si, sol, do, re, sol, fa, mi, re, sol, si, do, re, si, la. Fa, mi, re, do, si, la, sol, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, sol, la, si, do, si, sol, re, sol, fa, sol. Okay, so much easier to do it when it's a little bit slower. But you know what? I'm going to challenge myself now. All right, we did it nice at 65. What if we put it back at 70? Let's do it once at 70. Let's see. Sol, si, la, sol, fa, mi, fa, sol, si, sol, re. Fa, mi, re, sol, si, do, re, mi, fa, sol, si, do, re. Fa, si, do, re, mi, re, si, fa, sol, la, si, mi, re, do, re, si, fa. Sol, la, sol, la, si, do, mi, re, sol, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, si, do, la, si, la, si, sol, do, re, sol, fa, mi, re, sol, si, do, re, si, la. Fa, mi, re, do, si, la, sol, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, sol, la, si, do, si, sol, re, sol, fa, sol. Good. So it helped a little bit that I did it first at 65 because my 70 was just as good as well. Yeah, you can go even faster if you want. If you feel comfortable with these at 70, feel free to go to 75, 80, and so on, but it's not required. Very good. Let's move on to star number 43. We're still dealing here with 16th notes, okay, and we're actually combining 16th notes in various ways with ties over the bar line and within beats of the measure and so on. So this is number 43, and I will perform for you the entire exercise, and we'll leave the metronome at 70. Ta 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 da, 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 da. All right, perfect. All right. The challenges here are mainly in line 4. You know, with all the rests and so on, it's not easy. Again, you practice every single line separately, do it multiple times at different metronome markings and so until you feel comfortable. Once you feel comfortable, then start putting them together, and eventually you should be able to perform them in one pass without any mistakes. That's the goal. Okay. For next time, number 44. Number 44, it's exactly number 43. It employs the same kind of writing, the same kind of challenges. There's a lot of ties. The only thing is it's written in 5/4. Okay, so look at the dotted line, which tells you how to conduct. Okay, and you mix here conducting in 3 with conducting in 2. Very good. And then one more, and we're into mixing divisions of the beat, which should be fun, which is probably what you get in real music. You always have diverse music that mixes everything like this together. Okay? But until then, number 44 for next time. Very good. This wraps up my video for today. I want you guys to stay healthy and happy and safe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.